Jessica Bird, so beautiful. My poor mother. My poor mother has a minister for a daughter. And a minister for a son-in-law. And ministers can turn just about any conversation, even one that starts with, "Where do you want to go to dinner?" into a theological dialogue. And we've learned, we ministers have learned late night in hospital rooms and hospice offices and graveside, that it is better to talk about death while we are still living. Even now, when we are well enough to remember what we love about life. So my poor mother and my poor father were sat down one evening. That's what my mom called it. "You're sitting us down, aren't you, dear?" They were sat down in their comfortable family room for a conversation about death, about all of our deaths, by their minister daughter, who thought that there was nothing odd about this conversation, and in that was totally alone. But Judy understands. Judy Reinierson, a member here. Judy came to talk to me about death and to plan this sermon. Judy's quite well herself, but she has borne witness while dear ones have died. She even volunteered at a hospice to get better acquainted with death, because she wants to prepare spiritually. So Judy understands. So Mom, who's probably waking up just now, it's not just you and Dad that we do this to. It's our congregations too. But today it's Judy's fault. In that family room with my mother and father, I could feel them wanting to be anywhere but there. What are your fears? What are your hopes for the future? What outcomes are unacceptable? What are you willing to sacrifice? We moved through all of these questions, and then my mom volunteered. "What else could you possibly want to talk about?" My mom was squirming. She never squirms. She said, "We've talked about the choices we want to be made, and if we are not able to make the choices ourselves, you will make them for us. Enough, done." I didn't like that part. I wanted them to help me by preparing an end-of-life directive. But they want me to steward their lives when they're not able. I didn't want this. I wanted more clarity. But I think back to it now, and I can feel the blessing that these who gave me life trust me to hold their own. Judy says that her friend Mary Wanderpolo, who died in Judy's care and the care of this congregation, left 20 pages of instructions for her memorial service. Judy says that Mary was ready. She was ready to die. She had done her work, handed over her hopes, her dreams, said, here are 20 pages of instructions so you can hold me as I cross over. My father and my mother couldn't come to a decision. Would they wish to be buried or cremated? They didn't know. But we want to be together, my mom said. We must all be together, wherever, however, together. And that's where I began to cry. That's always where I begin to cry. Because that is love's testimony. You feel that, right? In the however, together. We can wear blinders to death today in a way that our ancestors couldn't. The bodies of the dead used to be prepared by the hands of their loved ones in their family rooms, and before that, on the ancestral plains, they were washed, they were perfumed, they were dressed by the light of the common moon or the oil lamp or the hearth fire. And often the same hands would dig the graves, just as we might do now for our beloved pets, making ourselves dirty with the dirt of the earth that will hold our dear ones. In India, at the edge of the river Ganges, pyres are lit by the closest relative of the departed. Today, we here in America have the power to absent ourselves from these proceedings as they have been sterilized from the white gowns of hospitals to the studied calm of funeral homes. Absenting ourselves, the bereaved, from the touch of death, hiding it from our eyes, from our hands. But death itself is not sterile. Death is as real as life. And what we hide from becomes ever more frightening. Like the boogeyman under the bed that we've never seen, but we know is horrific. When Reverend Forrest Church, the prolific Unitarian Universalist minister that taught us that religion is the response to being alive and knowing we have to die, when Reverend Forrest Church was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer of the esophagus, he walked towards death. He preached towards death. He thought towards death. On 5 separate occasions, he delivered what he thought would be his last sermon. And many he spoke of what he called the death test, the final test for a minister. Was his theology, were his ethics enough to stand up to the death test? Would he, in the last, have everything he needed to feel calm, ready, prepared for the inevitability of mortality? Would he meet death with clarity, staring it in the face and smiling? I want this. I want to pass this death test. And sometimes I practice. When I sense the possibility of death, when an airplane I'm on takes off, when I hear about a mass shooting, I practice what I would do if I knew the end was imminent. What do I practice? I practice saying, I love you. I love you to everyone and everything that I love, calmly and with conviction. This is my preparation. Orthodox Christians often live life as a preparation for heaven. The death test for their faith is whether or not they will achieve the final salvation. Orthodox Buddhists live life as a preparation for nirvana. The death test is whether or not they will return in a more perfect state of being. Unitarian Universalists that put their faith not in the next life, but in this one. Unitarian Universalists that believe a good life is one worth giving. Unitarian Universalists know if there is a hell, it is one that humanity in its wickedness has made right here on this troubled globe. Unitarian Universalists know if there is a heaven, it is one that we will all meet equally when we build the beloved community. The death test for us is whether or not we have lived well enough to meet death in all of its clouded simplicity with that ultimate dignity that will not hide from eventuality, but will smile in the face of mortality, knowing that we have loved well enough to let go. And for a test, that's a pretty good one. Have I loved well enough to let go? But a test is not what Judy asked for. Judy rightfully asked for more. How can I spiritually prepare for death is what she wanted to know. I imagine that's what we all want to know. That which made them a people, not a collection of individuals, but a people. Few answers, spiritual answers, come from me or I. It's we, us, and ours. That is where we meet heaven, where we know truth, how we cross over. Even if we are alone when spiritual insights arise, our soul's knowing has been informed by the connections that hold us ultimately accountable. When my mom said, "It doesn't matter how, but we want to be together. We must all be together, wherever, however, together," that's where I began to cry, because that is what ultimately matters. Have you ever found yourself bargaining for one you loved? A dear one is raced to the hospital or pronounced dead, and you speak to the holy you understand with conviction and certainty. You say, "No, take it from me." You are ready to give your energy, your life. Take me. And in those moments of prayer, it seems somehow very real and very possible. Bargaining, the learned say, is a stage of grief. I say it is the holy in us breaking forth from all reason to speak its irrational truth. Not that our life is so unworthy that it should be sacrificed for another. This is not about sacrifice. This is about connection, about the felt sense that rises in us that there is no boundary between our soul and the soul of another. That the connection is whole and holy and wholly real. There's a Jewish story from the Midrash about the creation of the world. God, the story says, had to contract, to get smaller, to make room for the creation. When God contracted, divine light was contained in clean or sacred vessels. And in all of the excitement, some of these cleans shattered, and with them the divine light scattered. Much of the light made its way back to the source, back to God, but much of it also attached itself to the creation, to the universe, and to human souls. To repair the world, it is said, is to pull the light back together again. To show that there is no boundary between the light in one soul and the light in another. To show that we are really not separate at all. This is the spiritual work, and it is the spiritual work that prepares us for death. Natalie Goldberg traveled on a spiritual quest all the way from America to Kitata, Japan, to find the ashes of her Zen teacher, Katagiri Roshi. Prostrate on the earth, venerating her departed, she says, "Took me a while, but I made it." It had been 8 years since he died, but it was 12 years that she had studied with him. In living, he taught her to remain steady of mind, to forego inertia, boredom, and resistance. But in death, there beside the grave, she thanked him for teaching her one more thing, that she and he were one. What we lose in death is everything that makes us unique, individuated, and separate. Mortal and alive, we are contained in a form, and we contain ourselves further with our ego, and we cling to this, our name, our gifts, our struggles, our needs, our wants, our failures, and our thriving. We cling to this so fully that we think that that is what life is. In death, life's true compass manifests. Everything we have given, shared, every point of connection, all we have loved, where the divine light in us touched the divine light in another, this new life, a life unhindered by the illusion of separateness, manifests. My mother, her sister Joanne, and I have traveled to their mother's and my grandmother Bubby's grave many times. We don't lay prostrate. We bring beach chairs. But we feel the same truth. I see her, my Bubby, in my mom. I saw her in Joanne even as Joanne came to die. And I feel her in me. She and we are one. And when my Aunt Joanne died, everyone started telling me how much I looked like her. They'd never said this before. But with her death, it was as if the resemblance, which is not really genetic, she's a half-sister. We share some genes, but not many. In her death, the resemblance came to the surface. The I faded, the we, the ours arose. In death, what remains is everything that we have given, shared, every point of connection. This is not an idea, this is a feeling, this is an experience, this is a knowing. Don't get me wrong, I'm not resigned. Death is not for me something to celebrate nor march towards as some great salvation or leveling. Life is a precious gift. It is as precious a gift as mortality holds. It is an incalculable blessing. But as Mary Oliver says from the 3-part reading, I want to step through that door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore, I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. Therefore, I look upon everything as kinship, as a restitution, as a we, an us, and an ours. Because ultimately, it is not about me, not about I. And death proves this. So what is the spiritual work? It is to grow to see ourselves as the opposite of individuated. It is to feel the way other lives touch our own and bless each touch as holy. The way the warmth of a rock on a sunny afternoon enters through the palm of our hand into our being. The way grief ripples through us as a formidable pain and a holy connection. It is to look ourselves in the mirror and pronounce the truth, mortal, individual, and then the next breath, connected. And to see how the border of our being is tested by that paradox. The spiritual work is to let go in whatever way we are able to the lie of our aloneness and sink body, mind, and spirit into the truth of our connection. This is what will hold us. Amen. And may it be so.